What's up everybody, 40 the Broadway Saiyan here, and welcome back again to my YouTube channel, bringing you guys another video on Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. In today's video, I have another Conquering Lufenia episode for you guys. This time we're going to be covering the upcoming Lufenia fight for the Beatrix Lost Chapters, which is going to be featuring the Marilith Gloria bosses. But first, before we talk about that, if you guys are brand new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. That way you guys are not missing out on future uploads. And if you guys enjoy what you see on this channel, be sure to hit that like button and share this video, as it does help me out. Also, don't forget to check out the Tonberry Troops website, in particular their resources hub, where you could navigate to the Lufenia research portion of their website. Here, you'll find comprehensive guides for every single Lufenia fight for Global Opera Omnia, which characters are great for it, how the orbs work, and also which abilities to look out for. Without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the upcoming Lufenia fight for the Beatrix Lost Chapters. Alright guys, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at this upcoming Lufenia fight against the two Marilith Gloria bosses for the Beatrix Lost Chapters. So if you guys are unfamiliar with the Marilith Gloria bosses, they are very fast enemies. They like to use abilities where if they break you or they're already attacking a broken target, they have a high turn rate, they can inflict defense down, and they do a lot of HP attacks, and they can get pretty nasty. And they also buff themselves too, which makes them even harder to deal with. So those are the kind of things you got to watch out for in terms of like these bosses if you're unfamiliar with them, because we have seen these bosses before. Now for the Lufenia version of this fight, first of all, let's take a look at that orb. So the orb is not going to appear until the 69% HP threshold, and when it does appear, it appears at a 15 count. From then on, the orb will stay. However, in order to increase the count of the orb, you have to dispel a buff. So having a dispeller is going to be very key, and when you do dispel a buff, the count goes up by 10. So the count goes up pretty significantly, but you just got to keep in mind that it is going to stay there, the orb, from 69% HP threshold and on. Now, some notes that you want to take into account for these bosses for the Lufenia fight is, first of all, they are heavily resistant to the dark element, and they are going to be immune to HP attack disable or HP attack silence. So Arciela, unfortunately, and Kefka, those debuffs will not be working for this particular fight. Now, you can still opt to take Arciela, but just remember that her HP attack silence is something that you're not really going to be able to take advantage of since they are immune to it. Now, there's some key HP thresholds that you have to watch out for in terms of the mechanics of this fight. So the ones that you got to watch out for are 69%, 49%, and 29%. So what happens is when one of the bosses reaches that HP threshold, both of them will cleanse all debuffs they have on them, and they will be granting themselves 6 framed buffs. Now, this is very key to remember because this is going to factor into the Lufenia orb. Now, something that you want to keep in mind is, let's say boss 1 reaches 69%, they're going to cleanse their debuffs and they're going to put those 6 buffs on. But let's say boss 2 reaches 69% as well, that will not trigger again. So remember, those HP thresholds, the cleansing and the buffing only occurs once when one of them reaches that HP threshold. So the way that you want to approach this fight is, the best way to do it is to dispel only one buff at a time is going to be very key. So I know characters such as, for example, Beatrix is getting her LD weapon, which her LD weapon is very powerful, and it does have an AoE mass dispel. Now the problem with that is, if you use Beatrix's LD, who she's still very fantastic for her own Lufenia fight, you have to make sure to allow the enemies to attack, because they do have abilities that put buffs back on. And then what's going to happen is that because Beatrix's debuff from her LD triggers, an additional attack after she attacks, it will dispel one buff at a time. So if you plan on bringing Beatrix, just be sure to let them take a turn. So if you're playing like the delay strategy, or like, the turn denial strategy with like paralysis or sleep, for example, you want to be careful with that if you're going to be running Beatrix, only because you want them to take their turn in the event that you do use a mass dispeller. So then that way they can buff themselves, and then you have a way to actually deal with the orb. So another thing you also want to keep in mind is that their charged attack, or their recast ability, and also some of their other abilities that deal a lot of brave and HP damage, they can be pretty lethal and have a very high chance of taking out a party member. So just make sure that your character's buffs and also the enemy's debuffs are set in place in order for you to prepare for that in the event that you are going to be eating a really powerful attack. So characters who can excel, which characters can you take for this particular fight? Undoubtedly, because he is also synergy, because he is the current burst character, Cloud is actually going to be the best if you have his World of Illusions 15 CP weapon. Now, for those of you that have been asking, where can I get that? For those of you that are a little bit newer to the game, if you have those red tokens saved up, go in the token shop and go find that weapon. It's called the Crimson Edge, because the passive from that particular weapon is just so valuable, because it allows Cloud to dispel one buff off of an enemy target every time he deals critical damage with one of his skills. And that is going to be very key, because it's better for this particular fight to dispel one buff at a time rather than dispelling them all at once. Now, obviously, Beatrix is still going to be good because she is synergy. This is her own event. Just keep in mind, again, that you want to be sure to allow the enemies to act if you're going to be relying on her AoE Dispel, so then that way they can still buff themselves up, which will allow you to deal with the Lufenia Orb. Also, Beatrix can provide some really nice support for your party, such as her battery, the defense up. She can also mitigate HP damage with her Paladin's Protection coming from her EX, so she's going to be pretty good for that. Now, you can also use Vanille. Vanille will get a few upgrades in the form of her character boards. However, just keep in mind that her damage output may not nearly be as good as it used to be, but she can still work because she can dispel. And then if you're looking for characters that can like control damage or make sure that your party stays alive, characters such as like Rude, Gladio, and Reno, even because Reno has Pyramid, and also Numb works very well for this, because a majority of the Marilith Glorias attacks are going to be physical, so Numb will delay them by 2 turns. Now, you can opt to go with like a full-on offensive strategy, and the way you do that is take Cloud, and you got to make sure that he at least has his LD, and then take somebody like Lightning, because those two actually work really well together. And then afterwards, take somebody that can like turn disable, so you can time your turn disable, make sure that they still have some of their buffs on from when they go into those phases where they cleanse and, you know, give themselves all these different buffs, and then afterwards, you know, pretty much never let them take a turn while still having access to those buffs that you could dispel to control the orbs. That's one way that you can actually approach this fight. It is going to be a tricky fight only because these enemies are very fast, and in the event you do take damage and get broken, they do have a high turn rate. But as long as you're aware of the specific HP thresholds, when to do the dispel, when to actually debuff, then the fight should be fairly manageable. It is going to be a little bit trickier compared to the last one that we had, but it is still a fairly manageable fight. Alright guys, so this is going to go ahead and conclude my Conquering Lufenia video for the upcoming Beatrix Lost Chapters against the 2 Marilith Gloria. Hopefully this helps you guys out. Thank you again for watching. This is 40 the Broadway Saiyan signing out. Mahal, everyone.